Before we get into today's video, I do want to let you guys know that today's video is for educational purposes only. Please remember to be kind to everybody everywhere in your everyday life, in your home, in the grocery store, and especially in the comment section down below. Please do not show hate to anybody, anywhere. Good morning, my lovelies, my beauties, my friends. My name is Christina and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I really hope that you will subscribe, stick around, take a chance in hearing some things that I have to say. And if you are a returning subscriber, y'all already know, y'all are my babies. So good morning, good morning, good morning. How is everybody doing today? I hope you all are having an amazing day. I hope you all have had a wonderful week so far. I hope everybody is feeling good. We are in October now. And how did everybody make it out through the storm? Everybody in Florida doing okay? It's one thing after another. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the new Netflix documentary that has come out that everybody is talking about. It is about JD, and y'all know who I'm talking about here, okay? Now, I have gotten a lot of requests over the years to do a video on this story. The only reason why I never have is because there's so much information out there. It's been done a million times. Jeff, after everything that happened, gave full confessions, gave full interviews, and basically told it all. So there's just a lot out there. Now, this new Netflix documentary that has come out has stirred up a lot of chatter. There is a lot of people that are not happy about it, like some of the family members and stuff that feel like that they are having to relive everything that they did back in the 90s. And there's also people that are saying it is excellent. From a viewer's point of view, this documentary / series type of show was different than any other one that I've ever seen. The actual director of this series is the same one that has done American Horror Story. Okay, now I don't watch American Horror Story. I know a lot of y'all out there do. I watched a couple episodes in the beginning. It's not for me, but it's still a very creative show. And the same man that did this documentary, in my opinion, again, from a viewer standpoint, did excellent at bringing a new flair or a different perspective to the story that many of us know oh so well. So I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of a few things, and then, just to kind of refresh y'all's memory on some stuff. In this video, though, we're going to be talking about the ending of JD and what all happened with that. I might be telling you guys some things about JD that you don't already know, so stay with me here. And then at the end, I'm going to give you guys my opinion like I typically do and tell you guys just from a very unprofessional standpoint what I think really happened, what I think went wrong with JD. And I'm always, when I'm watching these videos and y'all are watching these videos that we do over here on this channel, I always feel like there's an undertone of how can we look at the people in our lives, right? Like, what can we learn? What red flags, what warning signs, what things can we get ahead of and that type of thing. And this is no different. So let's just briefly start at the beginning. Jeffrey Lionel D. was born in May of 1960, and he was the oldest child of Joyce and Lionel D. He had a younger brother later on, and his father was a research chemist. Now, the reason why I'm telling you guys what his father's doing is because that is very important. Now, some sources say that JD was neglected, and other sources say that he was very loved and he was well doted over. JD says that he had a great childhood. He can't blame it on nobody. It's all his own fault. So let's keep going. Now, Jeffrey's mother was known, especially like by the neighbors and his father and other people around, to be very tense, very argumentative. I mean, she'd be out in the front yard, y'all, ready to throw hands with the next door neighbor over a trash can, honey. She was not the type of person that you said good morning to and you got a warm smile back. Okay. That's what they say. And it must have been difficult for JD to live in a house like that. His dad was gone all the time for work, very scientific chemistry type of, mind. His dad was very, very intelligent and smart. And then his mom was a wild card. And that's who he spent most of the time with was with his mom and his younger brother. Now, it is said that JD was a happy kid until he was about 3, almost 4, when he had a double hernia and he had to have a surgery. Now, this is where JD's father will go on to say that he believes that since his surgery happened with JD, that the oxygen may not have went to his brain the way it was supposed to when he was under, and maybe that's why JD would have these issues later on in life. I'll tell y'all my opinion on that at the end. But in school, he was described by his teachers as withdrawn, abnormal, strange, antisocial, things of those nature. However, very early on, JD developed a fascination with animals. Okay, now it all started when he saw his dad crawl under the house one day and pull out an animal, and he saw the bones and all that stuff, and it was like a light bulb went on in his head. He was like toys, okay? Like in his little mind, he didn't want to play with that tricycle anymore. He wanted to play with the raccoon that was back there at the trash can on the side of the house type of thing. So his dad was a little concerned, but he was also keeping an eye on him because he, again, was a research chemist himself, and he's just kind of wondering, is this a little bit of me in him? However, his dad would later go on to say that JD became obsessed with the bones of these animals and wanted to play with them, and he called them fiddlesticks. Red flag, hello. As JD started to grow up, he started collecting insects, big insects, small insects. He would get them down to their skeletons and then save them. And then JD's dad will tell a story about one night while they were all sitting around the dinner table and they were having chicken. And this is where JD began to ask about the bones of the chicken and said, what would happen if I put this in bleach? And JD's dad thought, wow, like he's going to be a scientist one day. He says, well, if you put it in bleach, you can preserve it and da. When JD turned 14 and was in high school, he was known in the high school as an outcast, kind of the strange kid. And he also began to drink and drink heavily. It is said that JD started drinking like scotch first thing in the morning and going to school, but you would not even know it. But he was drinking all day, every day in school. And one of his friends asked him like, dude, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. You done downed a half a bottle of scotch. And JD was like, this is my medicine. And he made average grades. I mean, he went on to graduate in everything. When JD hit puberty, this is when he said he realized that he was hands down for sure gay and not interested in women at all. He began to fantasize about controlling his partners and being with somebody that was completely submissive. And then that grew into that partner being actually helpless. And then it grew into the person that he was with being begging for mercy or for help. And something inside of JD about having that power just grew and grew. Now, JD would also say in interviews that he never told anybody this. He began to obsess over the chest and torso of a man. And then that obsession of a man's torso and chest started to become intertwined with his obsession of dissection. Okay, so when he would dissect an animal, cut them open, look inside of them, pull their insides out, it started to mesh with his sexual attraction to men.
Crossed over into this world of obsession or dark fantasy from which you just couldn't return. Can you pinpoint that? Is there a sense for when that really began to happen with you, Jeff?
I think it was around age 14 or 15. Started having obsessive thoughts of violence intermingled with sex. And it just got worse and worse. I didn't know how to tell anyone about it, so I didn't. I just kept it all inside.
Now, JD's first murder was in 1978. It was just 3 weeks after his high school graduation. Can y'all believe it? Now, JD would say that he saw this young man standing on the side of the road with his shirt off and his thumb out, and when he saw that chest and that torso, it was over for him. He pulled over, picked him up, and decided, hey, I'm going to take you back to the house. We're going to have some drinks. And that's exactly what he did. He took him back to the house. He got him really messed up. He slipped something in his drink to make him pass out, and then he bludgeoned him to death. After he bludgeoned him with this 10-pound dumbbell, he would go on to pleasure himself over his body and then dissect the body. From there, he separated bones from the rest of the part. I'm going to make this very brief and undetailed. It's bad, y'all probably know, and put the soft stuff in an acid and then poured that down the toilet and flushed it. The bones he crushed up into very tiny pieces and scattered them in the woods. I mean, he buried it first, dug it back up, did all this other stuff, but that's what ended up happening. And he never got caught for that situation. He ended up confessing to that later. But he would go on to say he wished he never would have picked up that first guy because that was it for him. Now, JD went on to take the lives of 16 other known victims, the ones that he admitted to. A couple of them were children, 14-year-old boys. He had been arrested previously for underage SA types of charges, and he just continued on his path, and he got away with so much. It is another one where JD was doing things right under the police's nose and he got away with it. One time when he was in his apartment, a 14-year-old that he had lured into his apartment with money, the boy's older brother had actually already been victimized by JD, and JD had been arrested for that. And then he lures the little brother in because their family really needed money and he offered them money. He slipped something in his drink and began to saw him while he was still alive. Well, I guess JD got drunk and needed to go get another drink, and he decided to go down to the bar and he left him there. And the 14-year-old crawled out of the house into the street where JD's neighbor's nieces saw him. They began to run up. They were screaming. They saw this young man who was naked and bleeding and out of it and couldn't really talk. And they called 911. And when they called 911 and they told the cops, by the time the cops got there, here comes JD walking back up from the bar. And JD tells the police, "Oh, this is my drunk boyfriend. I need to get him upstairs to go to sleep." Long story short, the cops let him take this teenager back to his room where JD eventually would finish him off. The worst part about that is the niece and the next door neighbors knew that JD was doing things. They could hear the sounds through the wall. They could hear the saws. They could hear the drills. They could smell the smell that is not like trash smell. It's like flesh rotting smell, acid smell, those types of smells. And the police would never do anything about it. Now, once he was arrested and sentenced to prison, he was sentenced to 16 life sentences, totaling in 941 years, and he was in prison for about 3 years before he was killed. Now, if you grew up in a time that I grew up, then you probably heard the rumors that we all heard back then that JD was killed in prison from a broomstick up his butt. Let me know down below if y'all had heard that before. It's not exactly what happened, but we'll get to that. So back to the Netflix documentary. It was very hard to watch, even though I know the story very well. Y'all let me know if it was hard for y'all to watch too, because when you start getting later on into the other episodes, specifically episode 6, when you get to episode 6, it really allows us as the viewers to make a connection with his victims, to see them, to see maybe what they were thinking. And, you know, it's not just a photo, right? Like you've got these photos here of the victims and that's all we see. And we know the story, but watching the Netflix documentary, it's like you're wanting to yell like, no, run, but you can't. But you're watching it happen and you're watching the way that JD is so simply manipulating these people. It is horrifying. It is not a horror movie, and they don't show like a lot of blood, guts, and gore, but it's horrifying. That's why I always say that like true crime, reality is always scarier than fiction. You can watch all these scary movies all you want, but what's really scary is what people actually do in real life. Now, in interviews, JD would go on to say that the actual killing part was the least enjoyable part for him, that was just something that he had to do. He was way more concerned with preserving the bodies in some way so he could keep them with him forever.
My urges, and so it just spiraled out of control.
Why the cannibalism?
It made me feel like they were a permanent part of me. Besides the just mere curiosity of what it would be like, it made them feel that they were a part of me, and it gave me a sexual satisfaction to do that.
And he would also say that, you know, maybe I could have went into like taxidermy or something, but for some reason I took this route, which is so weird. JD's father, from everything that I could find, was an angel. Okay, I've even seen comments of people in YouTube videos who said that he was their professor in school and he was a kind man. He never shied away from the fact that JD was his son. He faced it head on. He could have went and changed his name, moved to the other side of the country, but he didn't. He would go on to write a book. And in the book, and I was even shocked about this, JD's father said that he had desires himself of taking a life and doing other things.
Did you know before you read this book that your dad had his own obsessions and fantasies, that he had thought about, that he had dreamed of committing murder, that he had had an obsession with fire and with explosives?
No, I don't think that's the type of thing one asks one's dad.
Were you surprised to read that about your dad?
Very surprised. I didn't know what to think about it. I suppose everyone has their secret thoughts, and so it was somewhat of a shock.
That makes me wonder. Okay, now I wonder with JD if he had severe abandonment issues and trauma, because I think, and I am no professional, this is just, trust me, okay? But I do wonder if hereditary predisposition, if I'm saying that right, along with trauma, when they mix at the certain time, can create certain chemical imbalances or thinking patterns in the mind. And so I do wonder if maybe something that was some sort of mental disorder or issues that he's had, maybe that's been passed down through family, because JD was diagnosed with BPD, SPD, and psychotic disorder. So, I mean, those are some pretty serious and hard to deal with disorders all on their own alone. And then you mix it with maybe the trauma from his childhood, even though he said he had a great childhood. Maybe he didn't.
Do you think if you had been able to talk about that in a more open way with your dad, for instance, that it would have helped, might have broken this veil of secrecy and enabled you to keep yourself from going down that road?
I don't know exactly what, if anything, would have ever kept me from going down that road. Talking about it, I don't think would have made that much difference. Because, like I said, there were things going on in my head that I would have never opened up and talked about with anybody. I had thoughts, I had fantasies, but there was no outward show of anything that was wrong.
And this is the part that scares me the most, okay? JD said no. He said there were no red flags. Everything that he did was in his head. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. And let me tell you why. Well, first of all, he was drinking all day at school. That's why I think he had some abandonment issues, some neglect issues, because how his family did not know any of this. His dad, I'm going to give his dad a pass because his dad was working the whole time to provide for them. And his mom, she did work at times and sometimes she didn't. Okay. And that's another thing. His mom had mental issues too. I mean, she would do things to get attention, good and bad. And listen, we all do things to get attention sometimes, right? Kids do things to get attention. You know, I'll go jump on my husband, hide his candy, eat his candy, replace it with candy he don't like. You know, we all do things. But his mother would do things like pretend to take her own life, you know, or there was a time that she did really try to take her own life. I wonder if there were red flags that were missed. You know, mental health and stuff wasn't looked at and recognized the way that it is now. But before we wrap this up with the end, I did want to say, as far as the red flags go, the part that is scary is that not everybody gets the big red flags, right? There are some cases, and there may be some people y'all know, that the red flags are so big, they're flashing in your face, and the parents or the people that are in these children's lives, or maybe it's somebody you're in a relationship with or whatever, you're ducking and dodging those red flags and you're making excuses. I've been there before myself, okay? You love that person and you want to protect them, and you're making excuses until you end up hurt or somebody else does. So if you're seeing any kind of real red flags in your life, address them. Now, Christopher Scarver is the one that took the broomstick to the booty, okay? No, just kidding. That didn't really happen like that. It was a lie. They lied to us. But Christopher Scarver is the one that allegedly beat JD to the end. He was only in prison for 3 years. Now, there is so many prison rumors that went around about JD, okay? It was said that he was in there taunting the other inmates, that he was taking, ketchup packets and pretending to be blood, and he was molding his food into the shapes of body parts and leaving them around other inmates in order to freak them out and mess with them, and that he would tell people, ooh, I bite and stuff like that. And then there were other people that were saying he would never do that. He was too laid back and too quiet. But then again, I don't know, you guys. I tend to think that he probably did. He was literally in there with all of his triggers. They have to shower together in there. They're out there on the basketball court. I mean, what do? It's like putting a full-blown drug addict, like let's just say, whatever substance it is, and forcing them to live in a house that everybody's doing that substance and then saying you can't do it. It would be physical torture. So I tend to believe that he was struggling in there. But nevertheless, this Christopher Scarver was in prison for murder himself. Now, the story goes that he was actually hearing some sort of voices in his head that was telling him he was the chosen one. He ended up leaving this job. He went back to it. He tried to rob one of the people there. Well, he did. He ended up only getting $15 from this man, and he shot the man in the head, okay? After the man was gone from that one to the head, he shot him 2 more times. Not long after that, he was caught and arrested, and he was sentenced to life in prison. When he got sentenced to prison, he found out that his girlfriend was pregnant, and he went on to have a son. Now, his son has done plenty of interviews since then. Seems like a very well put together young man. He seems happy in his life. But the story that Christopher gave is that he was working in a room with JD and another murderer, and they were messing with him or something happened, and they weren't supposed to be, these 3 were not supposed to be in this room together unsupervised, but the guards allowed it. Christopher took a stick that was in there and beat JD and the other guy to death with it. He ended up allegedly being sent to solitary confinement for 16 years, which to me is the worst torture there is. I've done 30 days twice. I could not imagine doing a year or 16 years. Now, I do believe that the guards allowed him to be alone with them 2 in there, because I've seen them do that about way less cases than that. And I just really cannot imagine JD staying in prison for too long. I mean, the inmates were gonna get to him at some point, especially what he did. I couldn't see it ending any other way. I think he was a very sick human. He was a bad seed. Now, in the Netflix documentary, they showed him with a satanic book. Okay. Now, I know my satanic panic people that don't believe in any of that's going to be like, oh my gosh, Christina, but y'all know what I believe, honey. So we can sit down and talk about it if you want to, but we see what keeps happening. Just saying. But the guy that ended up escaping from JD, okay, there was a guy that ended up escaping from him. I watched on YouTube the trial where he testified, and he said when he was in JD's apartment, that JD was playing like the exorcism, and that different times when like the pastor was becoming consumed with the demon, that JD started rocking and mumbling, and he kept doing it over and over in certain demonic times on the show. So y'all take it for what y'all want to take it. I already know what I believe. Nature versus nurture versus spiritual. What do you guys think? Do you think it was the oxygen not to his brain? Do you think that's even possible? I know there's a lot of people from that time, 50 plus years ago, that have a lot of stories where they believe things went wrong in the hospital, and that could be why stuff happened to their children. I have a family member that's like that myself. Or do you think it has to do with everything else? Do you think it could have to do with starting to drink it so heavily at such a young age? Y'all let me know in the comment section down below. Other than that, I love you guys. I hope y'all have a great weekend. I hope y'all get outside, hug your family members, grandmas, aunts, uncles, mother-in-laws, father-in-laws. Don't forget to call y'all's daughter-in-laws and your son-in-laws too, okay? We need to all be reaching out. Don't forget to call your grandkids and your nieces and nephews and just tell them that you love them. And I will see you guys next week. Love you guys. Bye.
We are dreaming in the dark. We are nothing more than dust.